a drink called turbo, using bread as a utensil, and the origin of coffee. This week, we're in Ethiopia.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. Destination Eat Drink is for foodies who like to travel and travelers who love to eat. And this week, we're in East Africa for the amazing cuisine of Ethiopia. But first, take a moment to rate and review Destination Eat Drink on your podcast app, just like Alex Strath 1. They say, Brent brings on travel experts with unique stories to take you around the world and get insight into our beautiful world. Thanks, Alex Strath 1, and your 5 stars helps other foodie travelers just like yourself find the show. I've also got dozens of foodie travel guide ebooks available for download, including a brand new one. This one is from the delicious city of Pescara on the Adriatic Sea in Abruzzo, Italy. Head to buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink to get the Pescara Foodie Travel Guide or any of the dozens of other ebooks I've written about food and travel. Xavi Curtis is the guy behind Go Further Tours at gofurther.tours. He takes adventurous travelers on trips in Ethiopia, Uganda, and Rwanda. I know. Amazing, right? Xavi and I talk about the cuisine of Ethiopia, including a dish of carbs on carbs with an Italian twist. The grain so small you cannot see it. Honey wine called tej, spicy butter, and much, much more. And coffee nerds, you're going to love this because Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. And I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Xavi Curtis from Go Further Tours. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. I'm looking forward to talking to you about a really, what I think is an exotic place, Ethiopia.
Awesome, Brent. Thanks. Looking forward to it.
You know, I don't think most people, most Americans probably know a lot about Ethiopia. I don't even know that they could point it out on a map. If you were talking to somebody, an American, a typical American who doesn't know a lot about Ethiopia, what would you tell them to get them a little familiar with it?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of people in the U.S. who might know something about Ethiopia, it's probably through the diaspora. But yeah, Ethiopia is a pretty remarkable and spectacular country to visit. It's also huge, so people don't realize it's actually the size of France and Spain put together. It also will be the most populous country in Africa, probably by like 2055. So it's already, hovering. I think estimates put it around 130 million people. And then, sadly, I think a lot of people have, especially if you're of a bit older demographic, 40 and up, you probably have images of, Ethiopia was the country where people were starving and there was donation pledges and all of this.
It was 40 years ago that Live Aid happened, and I was just talking with some buddies about this. 40 years ago, we were sitting in our apartment down at the University of Illinois watching Live Aid, excited about the Led Zeppelin reunion. But, it was to help feed, feed starving people in Ethiopia. And that was really how I learned about Ethiopia. That was my entry point for it.
Yeah. And, and we have amazing clients who come and visit, but who still, that is their image, that they probably are thinking it's still going to be something like that. And Ethiopia, it really has come a long way. It was actually, so we lived there from 2011 to 2016, and it was 4 of those 5 years, it was the fastest growing economy in the world. Now, I'll still tell you, there's water cuts, there's power cuts. But yeah, it's just like this fascinating, very culturally rich place. And then one thing that makes things really fun these days is that Ethiopian cuisine has started to hit the international scene. And so, one of the easiest ways to get somebody interested in a culture is through food and drink. And
Yes.
We're very lucky. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. And it also has a cuisine that's very, very unique. You use this spongy, sourdoughy flatbread called injera. I think the cuisine that it's most akin to is like Indian food, but it's still quite different. So for people who are interested, especially if you have like a deep desire to connect to different cultures, but then also interested in the history, Ethiopia is one of the oldest like Christian kingdoms of the world. So it has the Orthodox Christian community. But yeah, just a fascinating place. I mean, I feel very lucky that I got to live there 5 years and love getting to take people to see it and experience it for the first time.
Maybe 20 years ago, my brother was living in Philadelphia. He still lives there, but he had moved there, and he had an Ethiopian restaurant on his block, and he took us there. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever tried Ethiopian food, and I had kind of the same reaction that you were describing, which is, this is unlike anything else I've ever tried in my life, especially the bread. I was like, I'd never had bread like this before.
Yeah. And the amazing part is that injera, it's interesting. So especially when it comes to like the big holidays or for a wedding, the more fermented version, so the one that to a Western palate is going to be like, ooh, what is this, like sort of gone bad, right, is actually the more prized one. So yeah, it's just, but I got to the point, we were living there. I could not go a day without eating injera. It had to be lunch or dinner every single day.
And I remember in this first time that I had it, we really used it to sop up a lot of stuff on the plate. Is that typical of using it almost as a utensil?
Yep, 100%. So in Ethiopia, there's very few dishes that you would ever use a utensil for. So the injera, you always use your left hand is kept clean, right hand is used for eating. And the injera, it's always sort of the stews are served atop the flat injera, and then you're given some on the side to use it.
I need to keep that in mind because I'm left-handed and I don't want to commit a faux pas by using my left hand to eat with. That would be, it's, yep. I guess it's not thought of as clean because it's what you use to clean yourself, right? Is that the thought process?
Exactly.
There? Yeah.
Exactly. Very, very similar to like cultures in the Middle East.
Sure.
Yep.
Back in the day, I had a student from Ethiopia, and she was very proud of her country, rightly so. But one of the things that she would always remind me of is that Ethiopia was one of the few countries, especially in Africa, that had never been colonized. You lived in Ethiopia for quite a while. I have very limited experience dealing with people from Ethiopia. Is that a point of pride, this independence of the culture of Ethiopia?
Hugely. And I think that this is one of the things that when you do work in Ethiopia, also becomes a huge part of understanding and, potentially excelling in Ethiopia is how proud Ethiopians are. It can both be a huge sort of pro, but then you got to also manage it and see culturally why it is what it is. The Italians were there for an occupation. So like you will get parts of downtown Addis, the older parts of town, that you still have this sort of like Ethio-Italian vibe in terms of architecture and also just some of the coffee shops and so on. There's a hilarious dish called the Ethio-Italian friendship. So it's a plate of spaghetti, just very simply done with tomato sauce. And then it's actually served up on top of injera, and then you eat the spaghetti with injera.
So twirling of the pasta on the fork.
Yeah.
That is so cool. At the time when I had the student, I was researching a project actually on Eritrea, not Ethiopia. And I knew about the Italian occupation, but I didn't want to bring this up to her because I didn't know if this was going to be a point of contention, if I was going to somehow insult her. So I just let her ride with the independence idea, which was a great one from a pride standpoint. But yeah, Mussolini, he wanted to get into Africa a lot he wanted to expand their territory. Also, like the agricultural riches of Africa, where they could expand their food supply as well. And so what is Ethiopia known for growing? What kind of agricultural products do we see commonly when we're there?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the country's agriculture is actually just used for itself. They do have some exports, especially when it comes to livestock. But yeah, you're going to have your major grains are grown there. Teff is a really important. So teff is the backbone of the Ethiopian cuisine because teff in Amharic is actually, it stands to like literally translate as the grain that's so small that you cannot see it.
Wow.
So it's almost like a grain of sand. Like it's even smaller than a couscous grain or something like this. But yeah, teff is the the principal ingredient in injera. It's also one of these. It's a gluten-free crop, but it's also a very high protein grain. But yeah, throughout the country, I mean, it's sort of Ethiopia as it's becoming. It's still very much considered a developing country, but as the country is becoming wealthier, they're really like starting to invest in having cows, sheep's, basically any type of meal that has meat is considered sort of like the prized meal. And then obviously, I mean, the one key crop that is an export, and it's their big cash crop, is coffee. So Ethiopia, it's fascinating. So it's actually one of the few major coffee producing countries in the world where they actually consume more than 50% of the total product. So if you go to countries like Colombia, Kenya, these are places where they don't have a coffee drinking culture. Sure, they now in Cartagena and in Bogota, you might actually, as people have sort of started becoming more of this international scene, have a coffee scene. But Ethiopians, like, coffee is a central part of the culture and the social life in Ethiopia. The coffee ceremony is absolutely something that everyone should do when they go, but it's also something that Ethiopians just do all the time themselves. It's how they get together, hang out. And then coffee is interesting because it was first found in Ethiopia, and so most of your wild varieties of Arabica coffees, they're all originating from strains that come from Ethiopia. But it actually has, at least at the time when we really knew a lot about the food scene, which we still do, but especially when we lived there, they had 7 different grades of coffee. And actually the first 6 were all for export only, and only the 7th grade would stay within the country. So it even created this very funny system in which there was a black market for Ethiopian coffee exported to Dubai and then brought back into the country.
Wow. So, okay, so I got to unwrap a little bit of this because it's fascinating to me. When we go to one of these fancy third wave coffee places somewhere in the United States, you see Ethiopian blends or Ethiopian single origins everywhere, right? Because it's such good quality coffee. And then you're saying they've got these 7 strains, 6 of them go out of the country. So my first question is, what's the 7th one that maybe I can't even get?
Yeah, 7 grades.
7 grades. What's the 7th grade?
Yeah, so that's just considered the lowest grade. It's going to be
lowest grade. Okay.
Yeah. So because it's such a hugely important part of their foreign currency needs is met by exporting coffee.
Gotcha.
So, the highest grades all need to be for export. That's where they can get their money, and then they keep the final grade for on the ground.
Well, I'll tell you, the Italians didn't teach them that, because in Italy, it's like they keep the good stuff for themselves. Like they won't export a lot of the highest grade stuff. They're like, nah, that's for me and my family. You guys can have the rest of it. But they've got to do it for their economy. Tell me about coffee culture a little bit. Like if I go to Ethiopia, what would it be like? Like where would I go and what would the experience be like?
Yeah, so there's sort of 2 distinct versions, and both are very much something that you would find in Addis. And then in the countryside, you're more going to find the latter version, which is the coffee ceremony. But yeah, Ethiopians are going to be caffeinated all day, every day. So I would say that I think a lot of Ethiopians even skip breakfast and just have a cup of coffee. But you kind of have your 2 ways. One is a import of the more Italian version, where you have the espresso machines and you're getting either a macchiato or a latte or whatever. And these cafes are really fun places to sit. They're definitely, for the more affluent classes. You may go sit there for a meeting or just hang out for a lunch break, post-lunch, pre-lunch, whatever. And in that one, you're going to get a macchiato. You do get to sort of, as you order a macchiato there, you get to specify if you want it tekur, which would be is their color for black, or if you want it whiter. So you can have a normal macchiato, a black or a white. It's all going to depend on the strength of the espresso. But, the one that's much more unique to Ethiopia, and to me, the richer one, is the coffee ceremony. And so the coffee ceremony is using a clay pot, which is called a jebena. In this clay pot, you will be putting very fine grounds, and then you heat it over a charcoal fire. So you actually put the clay pot on the fire. These clay pots are made throughout the country. They're just made locally. And then you have 3 cups of coffee. So you actually use the same grounds for all 3 cups. So it's the first cup, which is going to be absolutely the strongest. And so this is like, if you're just going to experience this in Addis, you get to kind of have the ceremony without having the whole 2-hour process. And you get to have that first cup. At the same time that this is being done, you would have even started from the get-go of having green coffee beans and roasting them yourselves. There's always popcorn served, and then the 3 cups are called the abel, the tona, and the baraka. And the final one is baraka translates to blessing. And what's really interesting, so because this is a big sort of way that people get together, you'll have kids who probably have had coffee by the time that they're 5, 6, 7 years old, but they'll have that 3rd cup. So that 3rd cup really is not particularly caffeinated.
Right. Here in Portugal, they have, I forget how many different ways that you can order coffee. And one of them is kind of what you're describing. They don't have 3, they have 2, which is they run the first one through the espresso machine and you get your Uma Cafe. But then if they leave the grounds in, some people want that. And that's the second run that goes through. And that's obviously a much weaker version of the coffee. So it's that same idea, but I've never heard of doing 3 of them. That's fascinating. So we can do this fancy ceremony, you say. What about if I just want to go into a little coffee shop and hang out with the locals and just have, an espresso or something?
Yeah, so you could do that with one of the sort of like Italian, they're not all Italian, but sort of more that traditional modern cafe. I think that for many people who in Addis just sort of want to go sit and enjoy being around locals and have a cup of coffee, you actually go to a place that might only be able to fit 10 or 12 people on small little stools. And then you get that first cup of the traditional coffee ceremony. Mm-hmm. And so really it's almost more like making a very... it's very akin to an espresso because it's very strong.
Javi, one of the things that I always tell listeners is that the first thing that you should do when you go to a new city is to go to the local market. Because there's so much that not only to buy stuff, especially if you're staying in an Airbnb or something where you need to cook, but also just to have the experience because it's such a great cultural experience. And luckily, you guys at Go Further have your own market tour. Tell me a little bit about it. What's it like? What kind of experience would it be going to this market in the big city?
Yeah. And by the way, I couldn't agree more. I think what a fun way to start a trip. Then first off, you've been on a plane, get on your feet and then just go immerse yourself. And fun to see, even if you're walking through an area that's selling clothes, interesting to just see something totally different. But yeah, so we have 2 market tours. I would say that the one that's more common and most people will join is attached onto our Taste of Ethiopia walking food tour. So that's where we go to one of the largest local markets in Addis. And in Addis, most people, sure, you may buy your certain foods at a grocery store, but the majority of your shopping is done at the market. So even for meats, fish, and then definitely when it comes to produce, vegetables, and spices, this is all bought at a local market. We do 2 versions. One is at Shola Market. It's probably like an 8 block by 8 block square radius. No real major roads in there. So all little footpaths. And you just get to walk around. We're really good friends with a lot of the vendors in there, like Solomon, the guy who sells green coffee. Always has fun just, hanging out with our clients, even though the guy doesn't speak a word of English. But, we've been there long enough and they're excited to see us. But the more interesting and it used to be called the hardcore market tour on our initial website. So the sunrise market tour is one that we try and load up around 5:45, 6 a.m. And what we're going to on that one, it's not so much an experience about going to buy stuff at a local market, but it's actually getting to go to the largest wholesale market for fruits and vegetables in all of East Africa. So it's kind of the meeting point for all the trucks from the countryside coming in. I've seen 2 massive they call them Isuzu trucks there. But I can't even get a feel for what the quantity is, but just filled with cabbages and then unloaded into a stand that then is, this is the central point, and then it's going to quickly work its way out into the city to all the different local markets. And so, yeah, you'll be able to, like, let's say if you're going to buy in bulk, you might be able to get tomatoes there for 50 to 60% of the cost that they're sold at the local markets elsewhere in the city. So vendors come here, load up a truck or a minibus or whatever that they can to then get them into all the different neighborhoods. And so, yeah, usually that walking tour is about 90 minutes in a market. And from there, we'll then go have a cup of coffee. So that's how we started off. We'll go to the oldest coffee shop in town, which is called Tomoka. Get a cup of coffee there, and then we continue doing a little bit more of walking around the old parts of town, seeing a market, and then go out for a really fun Ethiopian breakfast.
Did I hear you right? Did you say the market is 8 blocks square? That's massive.
Oh, yeah. And that's not even the biggest one. Yeah. It's huge. So it's easy for us to spend an hour walking around.
And is it just food, or is there other things for sale there?
No. So it'll be kind of everything. The really big one, Mercado, which we will do on the Sunrise Market tour, that has everything. So it would have anything that's imported: refrigerators, TVs, everything that you could ever want to find.
Right.
The Shola Market one, it still has lots of clothes. It's also going to have things like mattresses, for example, are sold in one part of the market. Cookwares, silverware, glasses, all these things. But yeah, it's almost like they're very small little vendors at each stand. And it's kind of like everything that you might find at a big grocery store here in the US, but broken up into, instead of one vendor, you're going to have 80 vendors selling what one grocery store may have.
Right. Well, we talked quite a bit about coffee. Let's talk about some other drinks. What if I want to go out at night, say, what kind of alcoholic drinks could I get?
Yeah, so there's a few of them. So the one that Ethiopians have definitely adopted to drinking a lot of beer, as beers around the world are now produced. And their beers are basically going to be your traditional lagers that you can get anywhere. Things that become a little bit more interesting is Tej. So Tej is most similar for people who do a bit of home brewing or just know a lot about alcohols. It's similar to a mead. So it's a honey wine. And this can be fermented to very strong proofs or much lower. It's served in almost what looks like a little beaker. So it kind of looks like you're going to, your high school chemistry class. And yeah, I mean, in Addis, now this is over a decade ago when we lived there, but I think that we used to get a bottle of Tej for like 10 cents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but it's definitely a sweet, I kind of always enjoyed it sort of as an after dinner or with something a little bit spicier. Served for special occasions. And then especially when you go into parts of the countryside that are known and renowned for their honey production, those are the ones where the Tej becomes really special. A few other things, you have arake, which it's actually similar to like a rock. So it's like almost like an ouzo type spirit. This can be quite strong. Definitely used locally often. Like, let's say you have a stomach ache from maybe having eaten the raw meat, then you're always told to have a shot of the arak to kill the parasites. Obviously, this is probably not going to work, but who knows? And then probably the funniest, and this one we always offer on our Taste of Ethiopia Go Further Walking food tour, is what they call turbo. So at the butcher houses specifically, where you get the roasted beef dishes, they make this drink called turbo, which is a pretty hilarious concoction of Sprite, beer, and white wine all mixed together. Very sweet, not particularly appetizing to me, but always served with the roasted beef.
Who was the guy who came up with he just had a bunch of crap in his refrigerator and was just like, all right, I'm going to pour the white wine, beer, and Sprite. That's all I have left. Here you go.
Yep. I think that is what it is. And Ethiopians, it's interesting. It's a cuisine that doesn't have desserts as part of its food, but they definitely have a massive sweet tooth. Like for a little cup of espresso, you'll often see like 4 teaspoons, if not even tablespoons of sugar going in there. Uh, so yeah, I think that's partially explains why turbo probably is one of these popular drinks.
Ethiopian cuisine is so rich and diverse and flavorful, and I think we should probably start with wat, because there's several different versions of wat, and I'd like to hear a little bit about it. So I'm just going to open up this topic of wat. Tell me about it a little.
Yeah, sounds great. So wat is just the Amharic word for stew. Okay. So basically, any stewed dish that you would see as like sort of those the different like colorful piles that go on the injera, those are wats. So you kind of have the most famous one is doro wat, which just means the chicken stew. This one is actually like so specific to the major holidays that it may be a dish that even when we live there, that we would only have twice a year. You'd have it for Ethiopian Christmas, and then you might have it at Easter. It is a dish that is super rich in garlic and onions that are sweated down for a long time.
Good.
And then the critical ingredient that goes into all of these is the spice blend, which would always be similar to a curry, but it's called berbere. And so berbere is made from these large dried chili peppers, but it's actually a spice blend that has anywhere from 15 ingredients up to like 25, 26, 27.
Oh, wow.
So these are all dried out spices. And so we had a really fun time once just coming up with one of our blog pieces, which is we just made berbere from start to finish. And you might make something like up to 20 kilos of this stuff at a time, because you want to make it for not just yourself for the entire year, but you're going to give some away to family and so on.
Right.
But yeah, in Addis, the major wats that you're actually going to have, it would not be the doro wat. Now, obviously, you can go find it. But the main ones that you would have would be Misr wat, Kai wat, and then shiro. Misr is just lentils. So it's just a lentil vegetarian version. It's always going to be spicy because of the berbere. Now, spice to Ethiopians and spice to others is going to be relative. So I think most Westerners having Misr wat are like, ooh, that's very spicy. It's still sort of like this spicy dish, but nothing crazy. And then Kai wat is just using beef. And so that's the one that you'll much more traditionally get in Addis than the chicken one. And then really what is like probably sneaky my favorite or second favorite dish is shiro, which is a little different than the wats. It still comes as a stew, but it's actually a chickpea flour blend that's done with chickpeas, garlics, and a few different spices, and then just a little bit of liquid added to it, and then served. So if you've had Ethiopian, which I know you have, it's the one that looks more orangey.
Okay. So is it so it's chickpea flour and water, and is it cooked, or is it served loose like a stew, like a soup?
Yeah, so it's roasted chickpeas. And it's all going to be, so it actually almost looks like the consistency of a very thick soup, but it comes on the injera. So again, you're using the injera to eat with it.
Okay, now awesome. Yeah. So I wonder if that berbere, the spice blend that you're talking about, Xavi, I wonder if that's where the thought that Ethiopian food is similar to Indian food comes from, because then you have all of these rich spice blends in Indian food that's so important, and you have all these curries, which are kind of similar to a stew. I wonder if that's where the comparison comes in.
100%. That's so we kind of saw it in 3 different ways. So one is the spice blends, which are so similar to curries. Like a lot of the ingredients, like, using things like cardamom, false cardamom, rue, ingredients that here in Western culture, like we don't cook with. Right. So that was sort of step one. So seeing that, and also obviously just as like we couldn't figure it out at the beginning, but the palate would tell you, okay, this kind of feels like Indian cuisine, like a little bit. Okay. Step 2 was all of a sudden using your hands, no cutlery, and using breads. So yes, injera is very different than naan, but the way that it's used is very similar. And then the third, which was really the kicker that kind of cemented this sort of connection, was the spice butter. So Ethiopians use what is a ghee, but they just heavily spice it. So it was, and some of the dishes that are the richest, you realize it's because of the amount of ghee that's being used in this cooking.
What do they call their spice butter again?
Sibe.
So, Okay.
Kibe. Yep.
Kibe.
And that one really, more than anything else, you can smell the false cardamom.
Okay.
And yeah, that's like one of those that I just like associate it with Ethiopian meat dishes. When I think of kibe, I think of Ethiopian meat.
There's not a lot of Ethiopians here, but there's a lot of folks from Southern Asia. And so we're seeing grocery stores in our city in Portugal start to open up from these folks who have migrated from South Asia. And so we're starting to see a lot of cardamom and stuff like that, allspice and star anise and stuff like that come in here that you typically would not associate with Portuguese cuisine. And it's making for an exciting time because right now in our city, which is a medium city by Portuguese standards, would be a very small city by Ethiopian standards, I would imagine. We have 2 Nepalese restaurants that have opened here within the last couple of years. So so it's becoming a much richer and diverse cuisine, and a lot of it is thanks to some of these spices that you're talking about, Xavi. I want to talk about another dish called kitfo. Is that how you pronounce this meat dish that is so popular in Ethiopia?
Kitfo. This
Kitfo.
is like basically, if it was a Saturday or Sunday, or let's just say we were trying to celebrate a new engagement of a couple or a big accomplishment at work or whatever, birthday, going out on a Saturday or Sunday to eat kitfo for lunch would definitely be kind of like the thing to do. Kitfo is going to be most similar in some ways in terms of prep that people can think is like a steak tartare. So it's your highest, nicest cut of beef. So generally the filet. And then it's actually cut up with knives into what would almost look like a ground meat. And then this next step is very simple. From there, all you do is using a very similar thing to what we talked about with the coffee ceremony, the clay pot that is called the jebena. They then just smother it with the spiced butter and then serve it on top of injera or a couple different pieces of bread. Ethiopian cuisine does have their own different sort of takes on flatbreads. But yeah, kitfo is spectacular. It's you are given the option of either ordering it fully raw, basically lightly warmed, or then all the way to cooked. But yeah, if you were looking to stand out as being not just an adventurous eater, but also eating what the rest of the Ethiopians would be having, it's the fully raw version of kitfo. And it can be quite spicy.
Okay. Because of the butter?
So it's the butter, but then they also add in chopped jalapenos.
Okay. All right. Good. I would have to imagine, Xavi, that, when your guests are coming to Ethiopia, Westerners especially, that they have to be pretty adventurous souls in the first place just to decide that they're going to travel to Ethiopia. Is that the kind of folks that you get as your customers?
Yeah, for sure. So, and this started to become even more clear as we expanded and started operating in Rwanda and Uganda, is that the folks who are coming to Ethiopia, it's almost certainly not their first country in Africa. And so it's people who are pretty well traveled. They may be coming for a reason as simple as Ethiopian Airlines is a huge airlines now. And so they may do a 24 or 36 hour layover because they're traversing the world flying Ethiopian. And then, the other reasons are people who get interested in the history, the culture, and or just have made Ethiopian friends, because Ethiopians are, that was one of the things about Ethiopia that was so special, is that it was very enjoyable to just go out on your own and sit down and meet random people anywhere.
Nice.
Just really, really welcoming culture.
That's the best part of travel, I think.
Yeah.
We talked about some of your food tours. These are 1 day or half day tours. Do you guys do longer format tours in Ethiopia?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really where we've focused the company basically since, I would say, 2013, 2014. So yeah, the sort of a few spectacular trips that one can do is the historic north. The kind of the crown jewel of Ethiopia is this place called Lalibela. So they are, it's their New Jerusalem, and it's a set of rock-hewn monolithic churches built down into the ground. And so actually from even nearby, you have no idea that this labyrinth of spectacular 11 UNESCO World Heritage churches are actually here built into the ground. But it's amazing. I think I've either been 6 or 7 times. I actually can't remember, and I still would continue to go back just to see Lalibela. The iconic church is called St. George after one of the priests, and it was built into the hill to keep it sort of hidden from invaders at the time. So that's sort of your northern trip. The one that often catches sort of social media feeds is the fact that you can hike up to the top of a volcano, an active volcano.
Cool.
So this is up in the Danakil Depression. Definitely a fun trip, but also very intense. When we send groups there, we have to send 2 vehicles just from a safety standpoint because it's such high temperatures. And then the place that is really special to me is that you actually have some pretty incredible national parks in Ethiopia. So there's a place called the Bali Mountains. And really the main attraction of there is just it's 5 different climatic zones in one park. But we probably only have about 500 Ethiopian wolves left in the world. So it's the one of 2 species of wolves on the continent, and over half the population is there in Bali. And so, even like once on a 4-night backpacking trip, we saw something like 40 wolves, which was incredible.
We'll have a link to your company, Go Further, on the show notes, but folks can also look you up at gofurther.tours if they want to learn more or book a tour with you, which I would highly recommend. Xavi, this has been a very rich and rewarding conversation for me. I hope you enjoyed it as well. This has been fantastic. I'd like to thank you for being on the show because I think everyone should learn more about Ethiopia and think about making a trip there. It sounds like it would be fantastic.
Love it. Thanks a lot, Brent, and really enjoyed being on here today with you.
Okay, that's Xavi Curtis from Go Further Tours. Like I said, you can find out more at gofurther.tours. That would be the trip of a lifetime. And if you want to hear more of my interview with Xavi, I have the complete interview available to my members on my Substack. Xavi tells me about learning the local language in Ethiopia, how travelers can navigate the language barrier, and that's all at destinationeatdrink.substack.com. You can become a member there. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we are in Modena for pasta with grandma, dipping cookies in wine, and pairing balsamic vinegar with Parmesan cheese. Don't miss that. Until then, there's plenty more foodie travel at destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a brand new video from my road trip in Italy. This one has the best pasta from that trip, including something called assassin's pasta. That's not nearly as scary as it sounds. A rustic pasta topped with crackers and what might be the best ravioli ever. You can see it all by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or go to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@destinationeatdrink946. And speaking of Italy, I just posted a brand new foodie travel guide to Pescara in Italy. The city on the Adriatic Sea has an amazing coffee culture their own, and a pastry filled with wine grape jelly, and pasta named after a musical instrument. You can download that or any of my other foodie travel guide ebooks at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson, and I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.